Good afternoon, everybody. Come on, Jen. Jen, come on. Okay, and happy Friday to everyone. Just a quick note, because we wanted to make sure we had a briefing today, but the president, as you know, has a very tight schedule. Today he's going to be heading to the CIA, so this is going to be a short briefing, so apologies at the top. But again, we wanted to make sure you guys all had an opportunity to ask your questions. So joining us today is Jen Klein, the director of the White House Gender Policy Council, which was established by President Biden at the start of this administration. This is her second time in the briefing room, some of you might remember. By creating the Gender Policy Council, President Biden fulfilled a campaign promise to create a White House team backed by the whole of government for defending women's rights and advancing equality. When the draft decision of Dobbs was leaked this spring, Jen Klein and the Gender Policy Council, along with other senior officials here at the White House, put every policy action on the table and evaluated them through an intensive process to determine which were the strongest and the most meaningful. With that, Jen, I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Karine, for having me today. As you said, when the final decision was issued, the president took immediate action under his executive authority to defend reproductive rights. And just now, as you know, he signed an executive order which builds on those actions. So just to talk a little bit about what's in this executive order. It safeguards access to reproductive health services, building on steps HHS has already taken to ensure that medication abortion and contraception, including emergency contraception and long-acting contraception, are as widely available as possible, as well as the Attorney General's commitment to fight any attack by a state or local official who attempts to interfere with women exercising their constitutional right to travel out of state for medical care. It also protects the privacy of patients and their access to accurate information, building on steps that HHS, Office of Civil Rights, has already begun to take to ensure that doctors and medical providers and plans know that with limited exceptions, they're not required, and in many cases, they're not even permitted to disclose patients' private information. It also promotes the safety and security of patients, providers, and clinics, of physical safety and security. And finally, it coordinates the implementation of federal efforts to protect reproductive rights and access to health care. As Karine said, my team, working really with colleagues all across the White House and around the administration, has been working around the clock since the draft decision was leaked in May, and we are going to continue to evaluate all options and steps that we can take. So as Karine said, I know we're short on time, so with that, I'll just be open to take your questions.
Yeah, ma'am, Senator Marco Rubio is demanding the federal government not provide sick leave to federal employees. Will you respect the Hyde Amendment? Will this administration respect the Hyde Amendment?
The administrator said that Biden administration was considering having Medicaid paid for travel for people. And with some of the instances that the president just highlighted in his speech just now, that seems like something that would be very useful right away. Just why isn't that included in this tranche of action? And then secondly, if you could just broadly speak, there's been some frustration with abortion rights supporters that this administration is not moving fast enough. Some of this stuff seems like it could have been done on day one, considering you knew the leak when what was coming.
So on your first question on Medicaid, as you heard from the president the day of the decision, and again today as part of this executive order, we are very focused on protecting that right to travel. The Attorney General issued an extremely strong statement again on the day of the decision, and has continued to be vigilant so that no woman, no person who is seeking a medical service in a state where it is legal is prevented from doing that. We're also looking at all options to figure out how to best effectuate that right to travel. On your second question, more broadly, I sort of take issue with the premise of the question, because I think, first of all, what the president did on day one, which was really significant, was to take immediate action, as I said, to ensure that medication abortion is available and accessible. 54% of abortions in this country are through medication abortion, excuse me. So that is a hugely significant thing to make sure that people have accurate information about medication abortion and have the right to take it. A sort of falsity that is already out there is that it's illegal everywhere in the country. It's not. So we are, in this executive order, taking further action to make sure that the FDA has the support they need to go through their scientific process, and that people have the information they need to access and get this vital, critical medication, as well as contraception, which, as we noted, the Supreme Court put on the table already. The other thing I would say is, the leaked decision was 2 weeks ago. So in addition to the immediate actions that the administration took, Secretary of Health and Human Services Becerra took a series of actions while the president was away in Europe. When he came back, his first public event was meeting with 9 Democratic governors who really are in the front lines to talk to them about what we could do best to help them and what they are doing on their own to actually ensure reproductive rights and health in their states. And then the last thing I would say, and you heard the president say it, is you can't solve by executive action what the Supreme Court has done. The Supreme Court has taken away a constitutional right that was precedent for nearly 50 years. And I think we all need to be mindful. He is very mindful. We are all very mindful that that can't be solved by executive action alone, and that the best and fastest way to fix that is by codifying Roe, restoring Roe by legislation. But that doesn't mean we won't be taking the actions he took today and more as we consider best actions.
So is there a disconnect then? Because there is frustration. There's no doubt there's a lot of frustration, and some of the frustration is undoubtedly through anybody in this room that's spoken to a voter or an American that supports abortion rights, that there is frustration with the administration. So is there a disconnect in what's happening and your ability to message it?
Well, I would say that, first of all, if you look at what NARAL and Planned Parenthood said today about the actions that we're taking, they've both called it, important steps. And I've been in constant contact with stakeholders across lots of different constituencies and lots of different coalitions, from women's rights to reproductive rights and justice, civil rights community, businesses, medical providers. I mean, the American Medical Association and the ACOG and American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, very supportive of the actions we're taking to protect providers' rights and responsibilities to offer the services that they are legally allowed to provide, and to make sure that their responsibilities, but also protect them in this time where, what we are experiencing already, but will continue to experience, is serious legal chaos. So I think we are taking strong action, and again, we're going to continue to look for where we can take the most significant actions.
Michael?
Does this administration respect the Hyde Amendment, ma'am? Simple question. This is a real simple question. Do you respect the Hyde Amendment or no? You can't answer that?
Michael,
You can't
go
answer
ahead.
that question?
Sorry. So I'm a little still confused about what the order actually does. It says here that that it directs Mr. Becerra to develop a report identifying potential actions, to consider updates to guidances, it directs the chair of the Federal Trade Commission to consider actions, asks Mr. Becerra to consider actions about protecting information. It talks about protecting the sort of safety of people, but it doesn't say how. I mean, how is any of this actually doing the things that you say it's doing, or isn't it just repeating what the president said 2 weeks ago that he wanted to do, but has already, both he and Mr. Becerra have both said their sort of hands are tied. I think Mr. Becerra's comment was that there's no silver bullet here. So, I mean, what is it actually going to do tomorrow?
There are many new things in here, so let me walk through a few of them. First of all, on privacy, what we are seeing is already an assault on people's privacy, and there's sort of two things in the executive order to address that. The first is through the Federal Trade Commission.
But it doesn't actually do anything. It says it asks the Federal Trade Commissioner to consider actions,
Yes,
right?
so the Federal Trade
What actions do you want him to do?
The Federal Trade Commission is obviously an independent agency, so the president can't compel them, which is why the words of the executive order are to consider. But what I believe the Federal Trade Commission is looking to do is to ensure that people's private health information is not sold by data brokers, that when somebody goes on and does a Google search to find an abortion clinic, that information is not made publicly available. They have to make their own enforcement decisions, and obviously certainly not me, but the president can't compel them to bring any sort of enforcement action, but they can clarify their policy, and that's what this executive order asks them to do.
Do you guys know what policies you would like them to clarify?
Just what I said.
But I mean, specifically?
They're the experts, and so they will make a determination and then release a policy statement, I believe, that will ensure that people's private, sensitive health information is protected on the internet, that people have access to accurate information. This is what they will be able to do.
Okay. And the second piece is the HHS secretary. He's not an independent agent, so why are you just directing him to consider actions? And what actions do you want him to consider?
So what the executive order asks the secretary to do is come back within 30 days with a plan. So part of this, as you are noting, are things the president has talked about and what the secretary has already started to work on. And what this asks for is a very deliberate plan and process to make sure that medication abortion is available, to support the FDA in their determination, their scientific determination about this critical medication, which, by the way, has been safe and legal for 20 years, and to take other steps. So to take one other example, emergency medical care. We need to make sure that when somebody walks into an emergency room and they're pregnant, that they are getting the care that they need and that they are not being turned away because a provider doesn't know that they're legally required or able to give them that care. So there's guidance that the secretary can issue, and the secretary will issue to make clear what kind of treatment somebody needs to receive when they walk into an emergency room. Same thing for pharmacists. Again, back to the notion of legal chaos. Pharmacists don't know whether they can dispense mifepristone, the drug which is medication abortion, which, by the way, is used in miscarriages, which are 1 in 10 pregnancies. So again, the secretary can take action through guidance from the Department of Health and Human Services specifically to make clear to pharmacists, again, what their responsibilities are, but also what their rights are as pharmacists so that they are not putting themselves in jeopardy.
Thank you so much. The White House says this executive action will expand access to medication abortion. How specifically will the administration do that? What concrete steps will be taken?
Well, that's what we're looking for the secretary to come back to us with. I mean, the two things immediately is what I've noted, which is that the FDA is in a process right now, and they need to continue to do their process. And again, they are independent; they're making their own scientific judgment. But to extend permanently what they did in April. So in April, what they did was they said that medication abortion should be available by telehealth, and it should be able to be mailed. And currently, they're going through a scientific process, and we can't interfere with that process, but the secretary can support them in any way that he needs to. And the other thing is we launched a website, reproductiverights.gov, and there will be many other ways to communicate. Again, as I said, both critical medications like medication abortion, but also contraception, which is at risk. Emergency contraception is at risk in states across the country now, partly because there are states that are passing laws that say that fertilization begins that pregnancy begins at fertilization, and that puts a drug like emergency contraception at risk, and we need to clarify for people what is and isn't available to them.
But just to follow up really quickly here, is this sort of like a wait-and-see approach here for the American people? The White House says that this executive action will be expanding access to medication abortion, but right now there's no details, no concrete steps until the Department of Health and Human Services releases that in 30 days? No,
the Secretary, I know it feels frustrating because we're taking action and then asking for more action, but the Secretary is already taking action. The website is already launched. The Attorney General has already made a statement that we will be vigilant about protecting people's right to travel, and also to look at the question about whether mifepristone should be available and how it can be available, because the FDA has already spoken 20 years ago that this is a safe and effective drug. And at the same time, what we've asked for is, continued vigilance and an ongoing process and ongoing work to make sure that that is really happening. As I said, this is not going to be solved by one day's action. So the strong statement at the outset, all the work we've done both before the decision and after the decision, and then we will come back. The report from the Secretary is just one step in the process.
So again,
They
the
moved the
Hyde
gather
amendment, will
time,
you
so we
answer
gotta
my
go really
question?
quickly. Go ahead,
Really
Phil,
simple.
and then-
Thanks, Jen.
Hyde amendment?
The idea of a public health emergency has been something some advocates have pressed for. My understanding is it's not off the table, but that the consideration may give a window into the complexities that you guys are trying to deal with right now. Can you explain kind of the approach as it pertains to that specific item?
Yeah, so as you said, we're really looking at everything, and it is definitely not off the table, as are many other options. When we looked at the public health emergency, we learned a couple things. One is that it doesn't free very many resources. It's what's in the public health emergency fund, and there's very little money, tens of thousands of dollars in it. So that didn't seem like a great option. And it also doesn't release a significant amount of legal authority, and so that's why we haven't taken that action yet.
So, man, pro-life
Sir, you're
Americans
being
want
rude.
questions. Pro-life
Sir,
Americans
you're being
have
rude to your
questions too. All the
colleagues, sir.
questions you're taking are pro-abortion. So let me ask you
Excuse
this
me.
question.
Excuse me,
Senator
sir.
Marco
Go ahead,
Rubio
Caitlin.
is demanding
Go
the
ahead,
federal
answer
government
questions.
not provide sick leave to federal employees who travel to get abortions. He says that would violate the Hyde Amendment. So
Sir,
what's your
take a
response
seat
to
in the
that?
back. You're being rude to your colleagues and our guests. Go ahead, Kate.
I'm not
Good
listening to
question.
the press secretary. I can stand right here and ask my questions.
The president,
Please. Please.
I can ask my question. She doesn't want to
the
answer.
president earlier
Great.
today encouraged people to go out and vote and essentially said, if you want to change the rights for women, you have to show up at the ballot box. Does that suggest that with this order, the president has reached the limit of what he can do unilaterally?
No, it does not. It means it's an important step that we're taking today, and we will continue to look at all options on the table that are legally appropriate.
I have another question about privacy. Is the White House encouraging people in states where abortion is going to be illegal to not use different apps, period tracking apps, Google searches on fertility, those kinds of things? Is the White House directing people to stop using those apps?
I wouldn't say we're directing people, but I think people should be really careful about that. And one of the things that HHS did just last week was, as part of this website and also made public in other ways, is literal instructions, practical instructions of how to delete certain apps that are on your phone, so that if you want to protect yourself, you have the ability to do that.
And then, sorry, quickly on the abortion pill. Is the administration directing the FDA to loosen restrictions on the abortion pill?
The president can't direct the FDA. The FDA has to go through their process, and they are in the middle of a process, not to loosen restrictions, but to clarify what the restrictions are, and who can dispense and who can prescribe mifepristone.
Okay, 2 questions left, Jeff. And then go ahead.
Can you get right here? And also earlier you said the leak decision came out 2 weeks ago. You probably meant 6 weeks ago.
Sorry, yes, the
actual
actual decision.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Can you give us a sense of what other options are on the table now that this executive order has been signed?
I'm not going to preview our process, but all the things that you've heard about that have been suggested by advocates, by members of Congress, literally every single one of those things we have run down and either decided was not a viable option at the moment or are continuing to run down.
And one question about the pill, is this White House studying or is the administration studying making it easier for people to get that pill without a prescription?
Again, the FDA has to go through their process. It's currently it is not available without a prescription, and in fact, there are part of these the guidance that FDA has already issued is pretty specific about it. So I can't answer a question about what they might consider in the future, but I would say at present time, it is a pretty regulated medication.
Last question.
Thank you. One of the executive actions announced today was creating a task force. Why wasn't that created after the Dobbs decision was leaked to help prepare?
So we've been, a number of us have called it a task force, a war room. We've been meeting literally every day for weeks, far before the not only the decision, but the leaked decision, to think about all of the options that we could put in place to respond. So this just formalizes the interagency work that's been going on between the Department of Justice, the Department of Health and Human Services, really all of the agencies, and across the White House. The reason actually we decided to formalize it and also to make clear that it will also be available as a way to communicate and coordinate with states was when the president met with the governors, they specifically asked for it. One of the things that was really interesting to us is that when we've been meeting with state attorneys general, state legislators, and as well when the president met with the governors, and by the way, the vice president has had a number of meetings, as have I, with all of those different state officials. One of the things that has come to the front is the importance of connecting them to each other, creating a network so that they can learn from each other. So, states that are looking at laws to prevent extradition of providers who are providing a legal service in the state of, where they reside. It became really clear that this was something that was very much needed. So we decided to make it part of this order.
One clarifying question on the public health emergency. Would you say that the White House believes that it has the authority to declare the public health emergency to preserve broad access to abortion services?
The Secretary of Health and Human Services has to declare a public health emergency, and it's not a question of legal authority that he has the authority to do that at any time. The question is, what authority does he gain by declaring a public health emergency?
Will you take any questions from our pro-life American audience at all? No, you'll just walk away. Okay.
Thank you.